The air in Havenwood carried the crisp bite of autumn, a small town cradled by rolling hills, ablaze with amber and crimson leaves. The streets wound lazily past clapboard houses, their porches adorned with pumpkins and swaying wind chimes, whispering secrets in the breeze. It was the kind of place where everyone knew your name and your business whether you liked it or not. For Clara Henshaw, that familiarity had always been a comfort, a tether to the life she'd built over 12 years with her husband Miles. Until tonight, Clara stood in their cozy kitchen, the scent of roasted garlic and thyme lingering from the dinner she'd made Miles's favorite, a peace offering after weeks of his late nights at the brewery he managed. The wooden table was still set for two, her plate untouched, his chair empty. She clutched a glass of red wine, its deep ruby hue catching the flicker of the pendant light above. Her hazel eyes, usually warm and steady, were rimmed with exhaustion, tracing the clock as it ticked past 9 p.m. He'd promised he'd be home by 7. The front door creaked open, and Miles stepped inside, his broad frame filling the entryway. His dark hair was tousled, his flannel shirt wrinkled, and a faint musk clung to him, not the hoppy tang of the brewery, but something sweeter, floral, perfume. Clara's stomach twisted, but she forced a smile. "Long day?" she asked, her voice light but edged with something sharper. Miles shrugged, dropping his keys on the counter with a clatter. "Yeah, inventory ran late. You know how it is." His grey eyes darted away, avoiding hers as he grabbed a beer from the fridge. "Smells good in here." "It's cold now," she said, setting her wine down with deliberate calm. "I waited." He winced, just slightly, and took a swig. "Sorry, Clara, I should have texted." She nodded, swallowing the questions clawing up her throat. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, until she couldn't hold it anymore. "Miles, where were you really?" He froze, bottle halfway to his lips. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I called the brewery at 8. No one answered, not even your cell." Her voice trembled, but she pressed on. "And you smell like someone else." Miles set the beer down hard, the glass thudding against the counter. "You're imagining things. I was at work. End of story." But Clara wasn't imagining the faint red smear on his collar lipstick, too bold to be hers. She stepped closer, her heart hammering, and pointed at it. "Then what's that?" His hand flew to his neck, fingers brushing the stain. For a split second, panic flashed across his face before he masked it with a scoff. "Probably paint or something from the barrels. You're being ridiculous." "Am I?" Her voice cracked, tears stinging her eyes. "Miles, don't lie to me. Not after everything we've—" A sharp knock at the door cut her off. They both turned, startled. It was too late for visitors in Havenwood. Miles moved first, brushing past her with a muttered, "I'll get it." Clara followed, her bare feet silent on the hardwood. He opened the door, and there stood a woman Clara had never seen before. She was striking tall, with sleek black hair and a tailored coat that screamed city money, not small-town grit. Her green eyes locked onto Miles, sharp and unyielding. "Miles," the woman said, her voice smooth as velvet but laced with steel. "We need to talk, now." Clara's breath caught. "Who are you?" she demanded, stepping forward. The woman's gaze flicked to her, cool and appraising, before returning to Miles. "Ask him," she said. "He knows exactly who I am." Miles's face drained of color. "Lydia, this isn't the time." "Lydia?" Clara echoed, the name a dagger in her chest. She turned to her husband, searching his eyes for answers, but he wouldn't meet her stare. "Miles, what the hell is going on?" Before he could answer, Lydia reached into her coat and pulled out a thick envelope, tossing it onto the threshold. It landed with a soft thud, papers spilling out photos, documents, a flash of handwriting Clara recognized as his. "You thought you could keep this quiet?" Lydia said, her lips curling into a bitter smile. "Time's up." Clara lunged for the envelope, her fingers trembling as she snatched up a photo. It was Milesarm around Lydia, laughing in some sunlit place that wasn't Havenwood. The date stamp in the corner read 3 months ago. Her world tilted, the room spinning as she looked up at him. "Clara, I can explain," he started, but she cut him off with a choked sob. "Explain what? That you've been living a lie?" She clutched the photo, her voice rising. "Who is she, Miles? And what else don't I know? Lydia crossed her arms, her expression unreadable. Oh, there's plenty you don't know. Like the account he opened last week. $50,000, Clara. Where do you think that came from? The words hit like a punch. $50,000? They'd been scraping by for years. Where had he gotten that kind of money? Clara's knees buckled, and she gripped the doorframe, staring at the man she thought she knew. Miles opened his mouth, but no words came. Then, from the shadows beyond the porch, a car engine purred to life. Headlights flared, cutting through the night, and Clara glimpsed a figure in the driver's seat, someone watching, waiting. Lydia glanced back, her composure faltering for the first time. "We're not alone," she whispered, her voice tight. "Miles, you idiot, what have you done?" The car door slammed, and footsteps crunched on the gravel drive, drawing closer. Clara's heart pounded as the stranger stepped into the light, their face obscured by the brim of a hat. In their hand glinted something metallic, a key, a weapon she couldn't tell. "Who are you?" Clara cried, her voice breaking. The figure paused, tilting their head. When they spoke, their voice was low, deliberate, and chillingly familiar. "Ask your husband. He's the one who invited me here." Segment 2. Tangled lies and flickering lights. The wind picked up, rustling the fiery leaves outside as the stranger's words hung in the air like smoke. Clara's gaze snapped to Miles, her chest tight with a cocktail of dread and fury. The porch light buzzed faintly, casting jagged shadows across his face's jaw clenched, his eyes wide with something she couldn't place. Fear? Guilt? She didn't know him anymore. "Invited you?" Clara rasped, her voice raw. "Miles, who is this?" The figure stepped closer, boots scuffing the weathered wood of the porch. The metallic glint in their hand resolved into a set of keys, dangling from a chain with a small engraved medallion. The light caught it just enough for Clara to make out a singular crescent moon cradling a star. Her breath hitched. She'd seen that before, hadn't she? Somewhere distant, buried in memory. Miles held up a hand, his voice shaky but firm. "Clara, just go inside. I'll handle this." "Handle what?" she snapped, planting herself between him and the stranger. "You don't get to shut me out now, not after this." She waved the photo of him and Lydia, its edges crumpling in her grip. Lydia smirked, leaning against the doorframe with a casualness that grated on Clara's nerves. "Oh, let him squirm. He's good at that." "Shut up, Lydia," Miles growled, his composure cracking. He turned to the stranger, lowering his voice. "You weren't supposed to come here, not yet." The stranger tilted their head, the hat still shadowing their face. "Plans change when you stop answering calls, Miles. You think I'd let this slide?" Their voice deep, gravelly, unmistakably masculine sent a shiver down Clara's spine. She knew it, didn't she? From somewhere before Havenwood, before Miles, before the life she'd stitched together here. Clara's mind raced, grasping at fragments. "Wait, I know you," she said, stepping toward the man. "Your voice." The stranger stiffened, keys jingling as he pocketed them. "You've got a good memory, Clara Henshaw." He tipped his hat up just enough to reveal a pair of piercing blue eyes, lined with years and secrets. "But let's not get ahead of ourselves." Her stomach dropped. "He knows my name." "Who are you?" she demanded again, louder this time. "Name's Gideon," he said, his tone clipped. "And your husband owes me, big." "Owes you?" Clara whirled on Miles. "For what? 50 grand? Is that what this is about?" Miles raked a hand through his hair, pacing the porch like a trapped animal. "It's not what you think, Clara. It's complicated." "Complicated?" Lydia cut in, her laugh sharp and bitter. "Tell her, Miles. Tell her how you begged me for the money. How you said it was for her for some dream house of fresh start. And then you blew it all." Clara's knees weakened, the world tilting again. "A dream house?" she whispered. They'd talked about it years ago, saving up, moving out of Havenwood to a place with a big porch and a view. A pipe dream, she'd thought. "You told me we couldn't afford it." Miles's silence was deafening, his shoulders slumping as he stared at the floorboards. Gideon chuckled, a low, dry sound. "Oh, he didn't spend it on you, sweetheart. He spent it on her." He jerked his chin at Lydia. "And me." Lydia's smirk vanished. "That's a lie," she snapped, stepping toward Gideon. "I gave him the cash. He didn't spend a dime on me." "Then where'd it go?" Clara's voice rose, trembling with rage. "Miles, look at me. What did you do with $50,000? He finally met her eyes, and what she saw their shame. Desperation cut deeper than any words. I invested it," he mumbled. "Thought I could double it, triple it even, for us." "Invested?" Gideon's laugh was colder now. "That what you call handing it over to me with no questions asked? You're a lousy liar, Henshaw." Clara's head spun. "Invested in what? Who is he, Miles? What's he got on you?" Before Miles could answer, a sharp crack split the niter branch snapping in the woods beyond the house. Everyone froze. The porch light flickered, then steadied, but the air felt heavier, charged. Gideon's hand slid to his coat pocket, his posture shifting to something alert, predatory. "Someone's out there," he muttered, eyes narrowing as he scanned the tree line. Lydia paled, clutching her coat tighter. "You said we were clear, Miles. You promised." "I didn't tell anyone," Miles hissed, his voice frantic. "This wasn't supposed to happen." Clara's pulse hammered in her ears. "Tell anyone what? What's happening?" Gideon ignored her, pulling a phone from his pocket and tapping the screen. The glow illuminated his weathered faces, carved, rugged, a man who'd seen too much. "We've got company," he said, his tone flat, "and they're not here to talk." A rustle came from the shadows, closer now, followed by the faint crunch of leaves. Clara's breath caught as two figures emerged from the darkness, their silhouettes stark against the moonlit hills. One held something long and thinner flashlight, a weapon. The other moved with purpose, straight toward the house. Miles grabbed Clara's arm, his grip tight. "Get inside! Lock the door!" "No!" She yanked free, fury overriding fear. "I'm not hiding while you unravel our life. Who are they? What did you do?" The figures stepped into the light, and Clara's heart stopped. The taller one was a woman, her blonde hair pulled back tight, her face hard and unforgiving. The shorter one man carried a leather satchel, his eyes darting between them all. But it was the woman who spoke, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Miles Henshaw," she said, her gaze locking onto him. "You didn't think you could run forever, did you?" Clara stared, recognition flickering. She'd seen that face before, not in Havenwood, but somewhere else. A photograph? A news clipping? And then it hit her. The woman from the bank, the one who'd approved their mortgage years ago. Only now, she wasn't smiling. Beside her, the man opened the satchel, pulling out a stack of paper sand, a small black device that hummed faintly. "We've got proof," he said, his voice smug. "And a warrant." Miles stumbled back, his face ashen. No, this can't." "What proof?" Clara demanded, stepping forward despite Miles's protests. "Proof of what?" The woman's lips curled into a thin, triumphant smile. "Ask him about the brewery. Ask him where the real money's been going." And just as Clara turned to Miles, the porch light flickered out, plunging them all into darkness. A scream tore from Lydia's throat, and the sound of footsteps fast, chaos erupted around them. The blackout swallowed Havenwood's quiet streets. The only light now, the faint silver glow of the moon filtering through the trees. Clara's breath came in sharp gasps, her eyes straining to adjust as shadows danced around her. Lydia's scream still echoed in her ears, shrill and jagged, but it had cut off, abruptly replaced by the scuffle of boots on gravel and a low, muffled curse from Gideon. "Stay close," Miles whispered, his hand fumbling for hers in the dark. She jerked away, her skin crawling at his touch. The man she'd loved, trusted, was unraveling into a stranger before her eyes, and every word from these intruders tightened the knot in her chest. "Who are they, Miles?" she hissed, her voice trembling but fierce. "What's the brewery got to do with this?" Before he could answer, a beam of light sliced through the night, the flashlight in the blonde woman's hand, now aimed squarely at them. Her face was a mask of cold determination, the kind Clara hadn't seen since that sterile bank office years ago. Her name floated up from memory. Evelyn Voss. The man beside her, wiry and sharp-eyed, clutched the humming device tighter, its faint green glow pulsing like a heartbeat. "Step away from him, Mrs. Henshaw," Evelyn said, her tone clipped and authoritative. "This doesn't have to involve you." "Like hell it doesn't," Clara shot back, planting herself firmly in front of Miles despite the betrayal burning in her gut. "You're on my porch, waving warrants and cryptics. Explain yourself." Evelyn's eyes narrowed, But the man still nameless chuckled. A dry, grating sound. She's got guts, Evie. Too bad she married a snake. He tapped the device, and a faint crackle of static erupted, followed by a voice Miles's voice tinny but unmistakable. I can get you the rest by Friday. Just keep it quiet, okay? She can't know. Clara's blood ran cold. She turned to Miles, her hands balling into fists. That's you. Who were you talking to? Miles's mouth opened, then closed, his Adam's apple bobbing as he swallowed hard. Clara, Save it, Evelyn snapped, cutting him off. She nodded to the man, who pulled a photo from the satchel grainy shot of Miles, handing a thick envelope to someone in a hooded jacket, time-stamped 2 weeks ago, outside the brewery. Your husband's been skimming profits, Mrs. Henshaw, laundering them through shell accounts. That 50 grand? Just the tip of the iceberg. Laundering? Clara's voice cracked, the word foreign and surreal. For who? Why? Gideon stepped forward, his silhouette looming as he lit a cigarette, the flare of the match briefly illuminating his scarred face. For me, darling, and a few others who don't like loose ends. He exhaled a plume of smoke, his blue eyes glinting. He thought he could play both sides keep, the cash flowing and the wife in the dark. Bad move. Miles lunged toward Gideon, desperation breaking through. You said no one would get hurt. You promised. Promises don't hold when you stop delivering, Gideon retorted, flicking ash onto the porch. You're lucky I'm here, and not someone less. Patient. A rustle came from the shadows, and Clara's head whipped around. Where's Lydia? She demanded, realizing the woman had vanished in the chaos. The night was too quiet now, the wind stilling as if holding its breath. Evelyn's flashlight swept the yard, landing on a figure slumped near the edge of the drive. Lydia, her coat tangled in the gravel, her chest rising faintly. She ran, Evelyn said, striding over. Trips, looks like. She's fine. Fine? Clara's laugh was bitter, bordering on hysterical. Nothing about this is fine. The man with the device smirked, holding up another paper bank statement with Miles's signature, deposits, and withdrawals, in amounts that made Clara's head spin. This says otherwise. He's been funding a nice little side gig. Care to guess what? Before Clara could respond, a low rumble echoed from the Rhoda car engine, closer than before. Headlights flared again, but this time they didn't stop at the drive. The vehicle, a sleek black SUV, barreled toward the house, tires screeching as it skidded to a halt mere feet from the porch. The driver's door flew open, and a new figure emerged. Tall, broad-shouldered, clad in a dark suit that screamed money and menace. He carried no flashlight, no papers, just a presence that made the air feel heavier. Enough games, he said, his voice smooth and commanding with a faint accent Clara couldn't place. Henshaw, you've got 5 minutes to hand it over, or this gets messy. Miles paled, stumbling back. I don't have it here, I swear. Have what? Clara cried, her patience snapping. What is everyone after? The man in the suit tilted his head, his dark eyes locking onto her. The ledger, he said simply. The real one, not the scraps these amateurs are waving around. He gestured dismissively at Evelyn and her partner. It's got names, dates, accounts enough to bury half the county. And your husband's been playing gatekeeper. Evelyn bristled, stepping forward. Who the hell are you? This is a federal investigation. Federal? The man laughed, a rich, chilling sound. You're out of your depth, Miss Voss. This goes higher than your badge can reach. Gideon flicked his cigarette away, his hand drifting to his pocket again. Told you, Miles. You poked the wrong bear. Clara's mind reeled, pieces clicking into place but still maddeningly incomplete. A ledger? Money laundering? Miles caught in some web of crime she couldn't fathom. She grabbed his arm, forcing him to face her. Where is it? Tell me the truth for once. Miles's eyes darted between her, the suited man, and the encroaching shadows. It's in the brewery, he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. Hidden. I didn't want this, Clara. I thought I could fix it. Fix it? The suited man's smile was predatory. You've got 4 minutes left. Move. A sharp click sounded from Gideon's direction, a switchblade, glinting in the moonlight. Not so fast, he said, stepping between Miles and the newcomer. That ledger's mine too. We've got a deal, Henshaw. Evelyn drew a gun from her coat, leveling it at Gideon. Nobody moves until I say so. The man from the SUV sighed, unfazed, and reached into his jacket. Clara braced herself for a weapon, but he pulled out a phone instead, tapping it once. A second later, every light in Havenwood flickered back on porch lights, street lamps, the brewery in the distance bathing them in a harsh, unforgiving glow. 3 minutes, he said, his tone final. And then, from the woods, a new sound, a low, guttural growl. Not human, not mechanical, something alive and close. Lydia stirred, groaning, her eyes wide with terror as she pointed toward the trees. "There's something out there," she rasped. "It's been watching us." The growl came again, louder, and the group turned as one, weapons and flashlights trembling in their hands. Clara's heart thudded, her world shrinking to the edge of that dark, endless forest stand, the eyes glinting within it. The growl rolled through the night like thunder trapped in the earth, low and primal, sending a shiver up Clara's spine. The porch light's harsh glare illuminated the faces around her Miles's ashen terror, Evelyn's steely resolve, Gideon's grim readiness, and the suited man's unnerving calm, but it stopped short at the tree line, where the darkness swallowed everything beyond. Those glinting eyes, yellow and unblinking, hovered just out of reach, watching. "What the hell is that?" Lydia stammered, scrambling to her feet, her coat streaked with dirt. Her bravado was gone, replaced by a tremor that matched Clara's own racing pulse. "Stay still," Gideon muttered, his switchblade steady in his hand. He flicked his gaze to the suited man. "Your mess, I assume?" The man, still nameless, still infuriatingly composer, tilted his head, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. "Not mine, but I'd wager Henshaw knows more than he's letting on." He glanced at Miles, his dark eyes piercing. 2 minutes, by the way." Miles flinched, his hands trembling as he backed toward the house. I don't know what that is. I swear. Enough," Clara snapped, her voice cutting through the chaos. She stepped forward, planting herself between Miles and the others, her fear drowned by a surge of fury. "No more lies. You've dragged us into this whatever this is, so start talking. What's in the ledger? Why is it worth all this?" The growl came again, closer now, accompanied by the snap of twigs and a rustle of leaves. Evelyn swung her flashlight toward the sound, the beam trembling as it swept the woods. Something moved fast, low to the ground, a blur of shadow that vanished before the light could catch it. Her gun stayed level, but her voice betrayed a crack. "We need to get inside, now." "No," the suited man said, his tone flat but final. "The ledger first, then we deal with whatever's out there." "Are you insane?" Lydia hissed, clutching her coat like a shield. "That's not a dog or a coyote, it's a distraction," Gideon interjected, his eyes narrowing. He turned to Miles. "You've got friends in low places, don't you? Who'd you piss off enough to sick that on us?" Miles shook his head frantically. "I don't know. The ledger, it's just numbers, accounts, shipments. I didn't ask questions. I just..." "Shipments?" Clara seized on the word, her mind racing. "What shipments, Miles? Beer doesn't need a secret ledger." The suited man chuckled, a sound that chilled her more than the growl. "Oh, it's not beer he's moving. Tell her, Henshaw. Tell her what you've been smuggling through that quaint little brewery." Miles's face crumpled, his shoulders slumping as if the weight of his secrets had finally broken him. "It was supplies," he mumbled, barely audible. "Medical stuff. Drugs. Not the illegal kind at first. Antibiotics, painkillers, stuff for clinics that couldn't afford it. I thought I was helping." "Helping?" Evelyn's laugh was sharp, incredulous. "You funneled it through black market channels, you idiot. That's why the feds are here." "And why I'm here," Gideon added, flipping his blade closed with a snap. "You cut me in, then cut me out. Bad business." The suited man stepped closer, his presence looming. "And why I'm here. Those supplies started including extra sun traceable, experimental, worth millions. The ledger tracks every move, every buyer. You didn't think someone would notice?" Clara's stomach churned, bile rising in her throat. "Millions? Miles? You turned our life into this? For what?" "I wanted out," he whispered, tears streaking his face. "I tried to stop, but they wouldn't let me. They threatened you, Clara. Said they'd..." A deafening roar erupted from the woods, cutting him off. The eyes multiplied 2 pairs, then 3, glowing like embers in the dark. The air thickened with a musky animal scent, and Clara's legs nearly gave out as the first creature stepped into the light. It wasn't a wolf, not quitter larger, leaner, with matted fur and teeth, too long for its jaws. A second followed, then a third, their heads low, stalking forward with eerie silence after that initial bellow. "Inside!" Evelyn shouted, grabbing Clara's arm and yanking her toward the door. Gideon cursed, pulling a second blade, while the suited man didn't flinch, his hand slipping into his jacket again, this time emerging with a sleek silver pistol. Miles stumbled after Clara, his voice hoarse. "The ledger's in the brewery safe. I'll get it, just keep them away from her." "No one's going anywhere," the suited man said, firing a single shot into the air. The creatures froze, ears twitching, but didn't retreat. "They're not here to kill us. They're here to herd us." "Herd us?" Lydia's voice was a shriek. "To what?" The answer came as a new sound pierced the night, a helicopter, its blades thumping in the distance, growing louder. Lights flared overhead, blinding them as it descended, hovering just above the trees. A rope ladder dropped, swaying in the wind, and a figure in tactical gear leaned out, shouting through a megaphone. "Henshaw, time's up! Bring the ledger, or we take it and her." Clara's blood ran cold. "Me?" she whispered, turning to Miles. "What do they want with me?" Miles's eyes widened, horror dawning. "They think you know where it is. Tu told them you helped me hide it, to protect you." "You what?" Clara's scream was drowned by the helicopter's roar as the creatures lunged forward, forcing the group to scatter. Evelyn fired, clipping one in the shoulder, but it barely slowed. Gideon tackled another, his blades flashing, while the suited man grabbed Miles, dragging him toward the house. Clara stood frozen, the ladder dangling feet away, the spotlight pinning her in place. A hand Evelyn sanked her back, just as claws raked the ground where she'd been. "Move!" Evelyn yelled, shoving her inside. The door slammed shut, the growls muffled but relentless. Clara's chest heaved, her mind a storm of betrayal and terror. "He lied," she gasped. "He used me as bait." Evelyn reloaded her gun, her face grim. "He's not the only one with secrets. That chopper, not federal. Private muscle. Someone big wants that ledger and they don't care who bleeds for it." A crash shook the house glass, shattering in the kitchen. The creatures were inside, and from the porch, the suited man's voice rang out, calm amid the chaos. "1 minute, Henshaw, then I stop playing nice." Clara's eyes locked on Miles, crumpled against the wall, sobbing. In that moment, she made a choice. "Where's the real ledger?" she demanded, her voice steel. "Not the brewery. Here, you'd never leave it that far." His head snapped up, guilt confirming her hunch. She didn't wait for an answer, rushing to the fireplace, her hands tearing at the loose brick she'd always nagged him to fix. It gave way, revealing a small, locked box. "Clara, no," Miles cried, but it was too late. She held it up, the weight of their ruined life in her hands, as the kitchen door splintered and glowing eyes filled the shadows.